Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from the 18th chapter in the book of Psalms. The range we most recently covered were verses 20 through 29, rather, and the three parts of this psalm consist. It is a salvation psalm, not in the sense of any eschatological expectation, but deliverance from mortal dangers and human enemies. So the first 19 verses are David's deliverance. David is the author of this psalm, and it describes his deliverance from mortal dangers. Then the moral conditions of his deliverance, and then the range we're going to cover today, verses 30 through 50, are just a reminder of his rescue. We're going to open now. First off, the occasion of its utterance was in the day Yahweh delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hands of Saul. So this is recorded in the 22nd chapter of 2 Samuel, although it certainly did not take place in the chronological sequence that it is presented. It is presented as an inclusio, which ties together with Hannah's prayer of praise that we read of in the second chapter of the first book of Samuel. So that, when this could have taken place anywhere. Now, beginning in the 2 Samuel, Saul was defeated, and he had escaped from him, but he had never triumphed over him. He could not bring himself to raise his hand against Yahweh's other anointed. So all his enemies, this could have taken place in the 5th chapter, the 8th chapter, or the 10th chapter of 2 Samuel. These describe scenarios that are consistent with what is written here, but because of the 50th verse we read of the dynasty and perpetuity, the promise that was given in 2 Samuel 7, so we lean on a later date for that. And just the two verses we're going to cover from the first section are 1 and 2. It describes 7 things that Yahweh is to David, and what I want you to do is pay attention to there's 2 people that David's talking about. One is God, referenced as you and he alternately, and the other is himself, and this describes his relationship to him. I love you, O Yahweh, my strength. Yahweh is my rock and my stronghold and my deliverer. My El is my rock. I take refuge in him, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my high tower. My strength, my rock, my stronghold, my deliverer, my rock once more, my shield, horn of salvation, high tower. That's 7 things. All of these physical metaphors have different functions and different designs, but they all metaphorically collectively contribute to the same metaphor of the omnipotent strength. So the secret to David's strength was not himself, but it was the one, and he just brought him through the cords of death, the snares of death, the cords of the grave, all these deadly scenarios, and he describes his revelation of his rescue in dramatic natural sequences, just dense clouds and lightnings and thick clouds, light, all these, the foundations of the world were uncovered at your rebuke, at the breath of your nostrils, verse 15. Then the second section, the one we reviewed most recently, consists of the moral conditions for his deliverance. David was delivered from mortal danger and had several near-death experiences that he evaded precisely because he was providentially purposed. So Yahweh had to put his servant through the ringer of fire to test him and to prove him and to refine him and to mold him into the man he was, the greatest king who ever ruled in Israel. Verse 20, Yahweh rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands he repaid me. For I have guarded the ways of Yahweh, and I have not acted wickedly against my Elohim. For all his judgments are before me, and I did not turn from his laws. The reward that he was rewarded with was, his own life, first off, and then it was victory over his enemies in wealth and power and prestige and a name that was just echoed throughout his time and history. But he did that because he was clean in heart, clean in hands, and so he satisfied. He had the moral qualities and calibers that Yahweh was willing to spare him for the purpose of making him all that he was. And he kept the law. The king, as much as the commoner, was bound by the law of Moses, and David was the model monarch for covenantal obedience. And much of the principles that we read of in this section are consistent with the covenantal system of rewards for righteousness and punishments for disobedience. And, the kings were commanded to carry a portable copy of the law of Moses in Deuteronomy 17. So all his judgments were before me. That term also, he says in Psalm 53:3, my sin is ever before me. So the law exposes our sin, and but he didn't deviate significantly or habitually. He did have his outstanding moral failure, but that is not yet. That takes place in the 11th chapter of Samuel, so that comes almost immediately after this. Verses 25 through 27. With the kind you show yourself kind, with the perfect one you show yourself perfect, with the clean you show yourself clean, and with the wicked you show yourself twisted. For you save the afflicted people, but bring down those whose eyes are haughty. The moral law of cause and effect is in operation in here. If we are kind to others, then he will be kind to us. And none of us are perfect in the absolute sense. We are works in progress. We are progressing on the path of improvement, but just the very fact that we are improvable and improving is a testament to our imperfections. Nevertheless, the great I am is sufficient to compensate for all the I am nots. But, if you are clean, then he's going to treat you the same way. You reap what you sow. Moral boomerang, karmic law of cause and effect. If you're wicked, it's not, you're going to be, if you inflict evil on others, evil will be visited upon you by him. But those who are afflicted, the innocent, the bystanders, the ones who just didn't have a lucky break in life, they are exalted in his eyes, but those who exalt themselves in their own eyes, the proud look, the haughty look, the prideful disposition, which precipitates the haughty look, are going to be humbled and humiliated and brought down by him. Verse 29, for with you I run against a band, and with my Elohim I leap over a wall. This concludes the paragraph. The original literary divisions of the Bible were not verse and chapter, but paragraphs. So this, much of what is consistent now, through him, he was able to, overcome these obstacles that just, he was able to leap over walls and do all these things he could not do in himself. He's speaking hyperbolically, but the main thing that's communicated is that the source and the secret to his strength was not himself, but the one above him. Verse 30, lesson itself. The his way is perfect. The word of Yahweh is proven. He is a shield to all who take refuge in him. He is a perfect being in every way, shape, and form. He is perfect in all his attributes, perfect in every measure. And if any of his attributes were in any way imperfect, he would cease to be God. So it is self-evident and axiomatic that God is perfect or he is not God. And the word of Yahweh is proven. There's been criticisms of storms for 2,000 years, but here it is. It still stands. It's proven. It's changed people's lives. And the prophecies, 1,500 of the 2,000 recorded prophecies in this book have come to pass. The remaining 500 yet to be fulfilled, or mostly pertain to the end times, but there is also an echo. What I look for in prophecy is the echo. It also often rebounds from one generation to the next, such as we witness in the book of Isaiah, immediate fulfillment, then messianic centuries later. But the shield, once more, that function, that terminology, that metaphor, which is familiar in the second verse, one of the 6 things that he is. So he is a shield to all, not just David, but anyone who takes refuge in him. And this, we can read the 46th chapter, first verse, for the great thing about how he's a refuge and ever-present help in danger. For who is Eloah besides Yahweh, and who is a rock except our Elohim? There is no other Elohim. The doctrine of the Trinity was not fully comprehended by the Old Covenant Jews, but Yahweh was Eloah is actually the singular version of Elohim, which is plural. So Yahweh is Eloah, but he's also part of Elohim. Elohim is a team. And the rock, once more, that terminology, which is familiar from Moses' inclusio in the 33rd chapter of Deuteronomy. He references the rock about 15 times. We read that repeating from the first thing, my strength, my rock, verse 2, the first my. And he is uniquely capable of being the rock. So there is it would be illogical for David to turn to any inferior power after he had gone this far with him. It is El who girds me with strength and makes my way perfect. This does not mean that he eliminates all obstacles and challenges and difficulties in our path. The Christian life is not a rosy path. It is not a red carpet rolling out for you. It gets difficult, but we do have the one above us, walking around us and over us. And before him, no enemy, obstacle, circumstance, or situation is stronger than he is. So as long as he is there, he is our source of strength, and he will make us better than... The secret, our ability to improve is only because he endowed us with the potentiality to improve, and he is already perfect, but he calls us to perfection. The Methodist founder, the founder of the Methodist faith, John Wesley, was famous for his, he really took Matthew 5:48 to heart. Making my feet like the feet of the deer, he puts me on my high places. He makes him as swift as a deer. This is in a hyperbole once more, but he's describing his feet as he's unusually swift. Now, he was faster than ordinary, and speed would have been something essential, especially when he was on the run, running for his life, first from Saul, then from his own son Absalom. So speed would have been a necessary ingredient for survival, but he exalts him, and he is only triumphant in conquering and emerging in the triumph because he puts him in the high places. And in any military engagement, the high place is going to be strategically advantageous to the one who has it versus the one who does not. Teaching my hands for battle, so that my arms shall bend a bow of bronze. Many modern Christians eliminate the picture altogether of Yahweh of hosts, that is his military names. He is a warrior who fights on behalf of his people. He is the Prince of Peace, but he is also the God of almighty wrath. So there is a warlike element, but more important than that, he is the best teacher in anything, not just for battle, but anything. But David is an illustration of this principle because he was a valiant warrior, consistently victorious, and a survivor and a conqueror, and one who triumphed and just won every time that he was out there. And he was only able to do that because he had the teacher, the strength, who, as a very young boy, enabled him to slay lions and bears in defense of his sheep, and later he would do the same thing as a 14-year-old boy with a slingshot to get Goliath down, and his military exploits just escalated from there. He was a man whose life was defined by war, and he was very good at it, and there was nothing unethical or immoral about his God-blessed and God-sanctioned wars. And you give me the shield of your salvation, and your right hand supports me, and your lowliness makes me great. This is a gift. This is where the yous, or actually the my's, really begin in the 32nd verse. That's when David refers to himself. So from henceforth, we're going to start paying attention to the my's, but you give me, so me is the my. But this is a gift. The shield, that image is familiar. He was a shield, one of the 7 things he is in the first 2 verses. In salvation, he is also the tower of his salvation, but now he's also the shield of his salvation. So the shield protects us from the danger of damnation, because the opposite of salvation is death, damnation, and destruction. He shields us from that and brings us home. And the right hand is the covenantal hand. It is the hand of strength. There is somewhat of a prejudice against left-handed people, but they're God made them that way, so there's nothing wrong with them. But the principle of he who humbles himself being exalted and he who exalts himself being abased is clearly embedded in your lowliness makes me great. Now, when we think of greatness, we think of the combination of cutthroat ruthlessness, aggressive opportunism, and just strength and bullying and just overwhelming assertiveness. But here the paradox is that his gentleness, his lowliness was what made him great, that he would even condescend to the creature of dust that David described himself as in the 8th Psalm. David had an awareness and a disposition of his own humility that is almost foreign amongst monarchs who wielded similar power. You enlarge my step under me, and my feet shall not slip. The road, the Christian life, the path that we walk on is not without detours. It is not without obstacles. It is not without things that can, stumbling blocks, and we all stumble into sin and we all fall time. But as long as he is walking with us, then he is never more than an arm's length away. We only need to reach out up to him in prayer, and then he will take us by the hand and lift us back up. And he will enlarge our step. He will make us go further and faster than we could otherwise without him. I pursue my enemies and overtake them. I do not turn back till they are destroyed. This is the nature of warfare. The nature of warfare is, as our own Stormin Norman Schwarzkopf defined it, killing people and breaking things. So this, you do not, once the enemy's in the run, you do not let them get away, but you want to overwhelm them and surround them. And if he who fights and runs away lives to fight another day, so you want them to, you want to kill them before they get away from the destination of which is nowhere near the vicinity of your swords. But David was a relentless military tactician, and he would have understood, as all men of war do, that you never let an enemy flee or attack you without challenge. I crush them, and they are unable to rise. They fall under my feet. Ancient monarchs were depicted in likenesses on shields and memorabilia as conquering kings as having their foot atop of the neck of their vanquished foe. So this image is consistent with much of the ancient ethos of kings in warfare. But David was not bragging. He was telling the truth. He did crush them, and they were all unable to rise once he was done with them. But the only reason he was able to do it was because of the one who was in him and empowering him. And they fell under his feet because this is what the sovereign deity decreed. And you gird me with strength for battle, cause my adversaries to bow under me. To the victor belongs the spoils, and the conquering king would have been the one who is bowed to. The people he defeated on the field were henceforth his subjects, and David does describe that foreigners submitting to me in the 44th verse. We're not quite there yet, but but the source of his strength, it came from him. So you gird me. You is once more a gift, as it was in the 35th verse. So the source of his strength and the secret of his strength was not David. David was probably a physically impressive man, a muscular man, but the true source of his strength was Yahweh. And you have made my enemies turn their backs. As for those hating me, I cut them off. So the enemies, he had a powerful ally and a friend in the sky, an enemy whose good side you want to be on and whose bad side you don't want to. And he is like a fierce mother bear in defense of her own. So he had a special affection and concern for David, and because he was working in him, these enemies were in the retreat. They were not advancing. They were making no aggressive inroads into the territorial integrity of the nation of Israel, as had been the more or less consistent reality during the period of Judges. They only finally got some stability when David really vanquished all the foes, and then he passed it on to Solomon, and then it just went south from there. It divided. They cry, but no one is there to save, to Yahweh, but he answers them not. These are the foxhole practical atheists, the practical atheists who intellectually acknowledge the existence of deity, but do not live their lives as though they have to answer to him. So, of course, there are no foxhole atheists, so he who lives by practical atheism, it allows them to do what they want to do, to be their own master, to chart their own course, to create their own system of morality, to in effect be their own gods. But when they are unable to deliver themselves, that's when the God delusion is going to be shattered, and they're going to call out to the one they denied, the one who didn't listen, and there is nothing like deliberate rebellion and sin. So some people expect to spend a moment in prayer and receive a lifetime of blessings. That is not the way it works. David's would have been crying when his life was in danger, when the situations were reversed between him and his antagonist, but he would have had that consistent lifeline. So his foxhole prayer would have been a quality one, whereas theirs would have been just, oh, save me, I'll do whatever, but no sincerity, no desire, just trying to manipulate them for their own survival. If they truly wanted him to act on their behalf, they would at least live their lives try to live their lives for him. And I beat them as dust before the wind. I empty them out like dirt in the streets. This is a degraded depiction of a defeated foe, but it is once more metaphorical in the way that the Jews signaled their contempt for the Gentiles in the ancient world, at least all the way up till the New Testament time, was to shake their sandals, and the dust would signalize their contempt. And this is somewhat similar to the battlefield. To the victor goes the spoil. The enemy lays in the dust. When we die, we become dust, et al., etc. But they are nothing. They are his refuge. They are his garbage. They are at his disposal, his command. They're in his hand, and he can just discard them as though they were dirt. So to the victor belongs the spoils, and David was a victorious king, and this was his prerogative. You deliver me from the strivings of the people. You put me at the head of the nation. A people I have not known serve me. Head of the nations, plural. So the mortal dangers and the cords of death, he described himself as drowning in the first of the three sections of this chapter. But here he also had human antagonists, those who were trying to kill him. So the near-death experiences were multitudinous experiences. And he was exalted from the sheep pen to the throne of Judea and then Israel, the united monarchy. He was the head of that nation, and Israel was a force to be reckoned with when David was king. Even the people who weren't Israelites bowed before them, and they served him because he beat their kings in battle, and he made Israel dominant rather than dominated. As soon as they hear of me, they obey me. The foreigners submit to me. This is an instant communication lifeline. The instantaneous. As soon as they hear of me, they obey. They do not question. The name strikes fear in them. So as soon as the word reaches their ear, they submit without protest, without resistance, without rebellion or anything like that. These are the foreigners who David has defeated on the battlefield, and they are his now. They are his subjects, under his command and his control. They are his to do what he wills, but that is only because Yahweh willed him to vanquish his foes on the battlefield, to make Israel a force to be reckoned with and a witness to the nations. The foreigners fade away and come frightened from their strongholds. This emphasis on foreigners, the ancient Israelites were by modern standards an intensely xenophobic people. They had a term, Gentile was just a blanket term for all other people. Not too many cultures had a equivalent term like that. The Greeks had barbarians because, according to them, they came from the north and they spoke barbar, so barbarian was the term of that. But more to the point of the passage, the foreigners who were once there are there no more. They have faded away, and they are not even attempting to occupy the strongholds which belong to David's defenses and fortifications. Yahweh lives, and blessed is my rock, and exalted is the Elohim of my salvation. He is a living deity. He intervenes in the life of his children and his saints and those he has selected for providential purposes. And he had a plan in David's life. And the fact that David was still alive was proof enough that there was a living God working in him on his behalf. And he called him the rock. That image and metaphor is symbolic of stability and strength and just the immutable, unchangeable, inexhaustible strength of Elohim, who is exalted, and he accomplishes his salvation, both his eschatological expectation as recently as the 17th chapter. David speaks on this, and more fully of the 16th, but the salvation of which he speaks in the 18th verse is rescue from temporal and mortal danger, death. The El who avenges me, and he humbles the people under me. When he avenges us, there is no need to seek vengeance ourselves, so we as Christians are committed to a different principle of non-retaliation. The Old Covenant Jews were a nation, and as such they had to retaliate militarily if provoked. But we Christians are pan-national, and so we are called to the principles of non-retaliation and waiting on his justice to avenge those who have wronged us. We may not even live to witness it, but this is when faith becomes especially useful, because the concrete certainty that all wrongs will be righted in the end, that we do not need to seek vengeance, that those who harm us, those who do us ill, and those who do not repent, not just us, but other people, will be avenged. There will be a cosmic retribution and justice. And but David was also the victorious king, and the people who were rambunctious and confrontational to him before have since been humbled through their defeat on the military battle. They are now humble, they are now submissive, they are now his subjects, they are now his servants. They are appropriately humbled, and David was humbled even by his victory, because he knew it did not belong to him. My deliverer from my enemies, you lift me above those who rise against me. You deliver me from a man of violence. This is his present personal possession. He is the source of his salvation, the source of his temporal deliverance, the source of his rescue from mortal dangers. So this is a salvation song, and salvation and deliverance are synonymous, though not, maybe not synonymous, but they certainly are similar. But anyone who rises against him, rising up, will be lifted. He will lift above them. He will not allow those who rise up against them to rise above him. He will be lifted up through the palm in the hand of the supremely sovereign one, the omnipotent one, before whom no enemy, obstacle, or man of violence can even get a hold near David's throat or anyone else. Therefore I give thanks to you, O Yahweh, among nations, and I sing praise to your name. David is giving thanks, and he's letting it. He's praying that this psalm will be read across the nations. In the New Testament, Romans 15:9, Paul appropriates this passage among the nations. Paul's mission was to bridge the Jews and the Gentiles, so that's why he picked this and presented it in the context that he did, but more to the immediate context, David is giving thanks. Gratitude is appropriate and necessary for all this deliverance, for all this victory, for all this conquest, for all this salvation. It was only right, and David wanted it to have a bullhorn. He wanted to get on top of a mountain and just let the whole earth hear his testimony of deliverance and salvation. And he's going to sing at the top of his lungs praise to his name, and the name is integrally connected to the power. Making great the salvation of his king, and showing kindness to his anointed, to David and his seed forever. His king was David. He was his anointed. He was his specially selected representative and executor of justice and their protector. He was he walked with God, so that was crucial, and he showed great kindness to his anointed. He allowed him to raise from the sheepfold to the throne and to emerge triumphant over giants and armies and enemies and nations and armies. But more than that, he promised him a dynasty in perpetuity, the seed without end. The forever is the final word of this psalm. David and his seed forever. Now 20 of David's descendants would remain seated on the throne in Jerusalem, but the Davidic monarchy ceased to exist since the Babylonian exile, but about a little over 580 years later was born unto the world the biological descendant through the virgin vessel of Mary, the incarnate one, who is the fulfillment of the Davidic dynasty, the eternal kingdom. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.